Two men in suits climb Vintém Hill at sunset, carrying briefcases, and vanish into the night. By morning, they are found dead, wearing lead masks, watches missing, no wounds. Manuel and Miguel, ordinary technicians, secretly dabbled in invisible energies, strange experiments, and whispered gatherings. A crumpled note instructs them to ingest capsules and await signal, written by an unknown hand. A bartender who last saw them disappears mysteriously after mentioning the signal. The lead masks contain an unknown metallic compound. Lab reports vanish. Witnesses report strange lights over the hill. Radar confirms an unidentified object. Withdrawn cash disappears. A beggar is later found dead, clutching a scorched bill. Autopsies and files vanish. A lead detective resigns under mysterious pressure. A colleague reveals they were building a device to communicate with non-human intelligence, their final test on the hill. Years later, mysterious radio signals continue to emanate from Vintém Hill, a faint, unbroken message waiting for an answer. The men no one truly knew expanded. To their neighbors in Campos dos Goitacazes, Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel José Viano were unremarkable men. Both worked as electronics technicians, spending long days tinkering with circuits and repairing radios in a cramped workshop off a dusty side street. They were polite, punctual, and paid their bills on time. Ordinary men with ordinary lives, or so everyone thought. But as investigators pried deeper, that image began to crack. Friends spoke, reluctantly, of odd habits. Nights when the workshop lights burned until dawn, when metallic hums and sharp bursts of static escaped into the street. Nights when the men would vanish into the countryside, returning hours later with dirt-streaked shoes and haunted eyes. There were the gatherings, too, whispered meetings in the back room of their shop. A select few invited, always the same faces, always after dark. Witnesses claimed they spoke of invisible energies and transmissions beyond the human ear. They purchased strange equipment, coils, copper wire in bulk, high-frequency transistors. And then there were the lead sheets, ordered in secret, cut to peculiar shapes. Most unsettling of all was their conviction, shared only with a trusted few, that there existed a way to pierce beyond the veil of ordinary perception, to reach something vast, something hidden. To the outside world, they were just technicians. But to those who truly knew them, Manuel and Miguel were men chasing an unseen force. And on Vintém Hill, it seemed, that force may have finally answered. The notebook of death expanded. The search of the hillside yielded little, no signs of a struggle, no footprints beyond the men's own. But then, tucked in the pocket of Miguel's neatly pressed suit jacket, an officer found a small, crumpled notebook. At first glance, it seemed mundane, pages of scribbled numbers, diagrams of circuitry, half-finished calculations. But near the back, on a single torn sheet, were the words that would haunt investigators for decades. 1630B at the specified location. 1830 ingest capsules. After effect, protect metals, await signal. The writing was hurried, almost frantic, as if scrawled moments before departure. The times were precise, down to the minute. Yet what struck the forensic examiner most was the handwriting itself. It did not match either Miguel's or Manuel's. The phrase, ingest capsules, unsettled the police doctor. What capsules? Why take them on an isolated hilltop? And what signal were they expecting? The mention of protect metals seemed particularly bizarre. Protect from what? Heat? Radiation? Or something unseen? Even seasoned officers admitted the note felt less like instructions and more like a ritual, a series of steps leading to an unknown end. One investigator, reading the words aloud in the quiet of the evidence room, swore he felt the hairs rise on his arms, as though the room itself had tensed. And then came the strangest discovery of all. When the notebook was dusted for prints, none were found. Not even those of the dead men who supposedly carried it. Whatever happened on Vintém Hill began with this note. But to whom did these instructions truly belong? The vanishing witness expanded. He was the last known person to see them alive. A bartender at a modest bar on the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro, a man who preferred to stay nameless in early reports. On the night of August 17th, he claimed, two well-dressed strangers entered just after sunset. One tall and rigid, the other short and fidgeting. both clutching small cases as if they contained their lives inside. They weren't here for drinks, he told the police. They were waiting. Waiting for what, he couldn't say. But he remembered how the shorter man kept glancing at his watch, muttering under his breath, "We can't miss the signal." The bartender thought little of it at the time, though he noted their peculiar request for a bottle of mineral water and nothing else. They left quickly, silently, as if bound by a clock no one else could hear. Days later, when police returned for a follow-up, the bartender was gone. His room above the bar was found unlocked, the bed neatly made, his few belongings packed into a single suitcase left open on the floor, as though he had been interrupted mid-departure. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses to his exit. His employer claimed he'd spoken of feeling watched in the days after the men's deaths, of seeing a dark car idling across the street at odd hours. The official report lists him as missing, presumed to have fled. But among the investigators who heard his trembling account of that night, few believed he had left by choice. And with his disappearance, the case took a chilling turn. Every living thread connected to Vintém Hill was beginning to unravel. The lead mask's mystery expanded. The masks themselves were peculiar, crude, smooth sheets of lead, molded roughly to the contours of the men's faces. At first glance, they seemed little more than clumsy protective gear, but forensic analysis revealed something far stranger. Laboratory tests detected traces of a metallic compound unlike any standard alloy used in industry. A few particles even resisted classification, suggesting an element not cataloged in any known chemical database. Investigators whispered about this in hushed corridors. Had these men stumbled upon materials not of this earth? Their purpose remained equally baffling. Experts speculated that the masks were designed to shield the eyes from some form of blinding light or radiation, but there was no evidence of such exposure on the hill. The interior surfaces were scorched in tiny patterns, as if heat or energy had radiated against the wearer's skin, leaving faint, almost imperceptible burn marks. Then there was the destroyed lab report. A single investigator, speaking off the record, admitted he had witnessed the notebook containing the full analysis vanish from the archives before it could be formally filed. Officially, it was misplaced, but whispers circulated of external pressures, of someone or something, ensuring the information never saw the light of day. The masks remained a riddle. Protective devices, ritual artifacts, or part of a dangerous experiment that had gone catastrophically wrong. And above all, one question loomed: why lead? The lights over Vintém Hill expanded. The night the men died, locals reported something extraordinary. From homes scattered along the hillsides, neighbors described brilliant, pulsating lights hovering over Vintém Hill. Some said the colors shifted, flickering from deep crimson to a blinding white, casting long, unnatural shadows across the terrain. Others claimed the lights moved with purpose, darting and hovering as if surveying the land. At first, authorities dismissed the accounts as imagination, perhaps amplified by the tragic deaths. Yet the sheer number of independent reports forced a more cautious approach. Witnesses spoke of a hum, low and resonant, vibrating through the earth and rattling windows. One elderly woman swore the lights seemed to follow her as she moved through her kitchen, though no one else saw them. The following day, military radar logs, initially classified, revealed an anomaly over Niterói at the same hour. An object, unidentified and moving in ways inconsistent with conventional aircraft, appeared briefly on two separate systems before vanishing without trace. The convergence of eyewitness accounts and technical evidence terrified investigators. It suggested that whatever had drawn the men to the hill, or whatever awaited them there, was not only visible, but also tangible, interacting with the physical world in ways science could barely measure. And still, the lights vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared, leaving only questions and a lingering sense of something watching from above. The missing money expanded. In the days before their ascent of Vintém Hill, Manuel and Miguel had withdrawn a significant sum of cash from their local bank, a detail that at first seemed routine. But when investigators began to trace the bills, none could be accounted for. There were no records of purchases, no transactions, no withdrawals beyond what the bank had noted. It was as if the money had simply vanished into thin air. Speculation ran rampant. Had they been paying someone or something To conduct a clandestine experiment? Or had they been robbed by someone who knew the purpose of their final journey? Then, a week later, the case took an even darker turn. A beggar was discovered dead on a Rio street, clutching a single bill marked in the men's handwriting. His fingertips were scorched, blackened as though touched by fire. Forensic tests revealed no chemical traces capable of causing such burns, leaving authorities baffled. The connection was unsettling. The men's money, intended for unknown purposes, seemed to have traveled in ways that defied logic. It suggested the involvement of a third party, human or otherwise, who might have been watching, waiting, and intervening in ways no one could predict. The missing money was more than just cash. It was a breadcrumb trail into the shadows surrounding Vintém Hill, a trail that promised danger to anyone who dared follow it. The ghost in the files expanded. As investigators dug deeper into the deaths on Vintém Hill, the trail of evidence began to vanish. Autopsy records, initially filed with meticulous detail, were suddenly missing. Toxicology samples, carefully preserved, were reported accidentally destroyed in a laboratory fire that left more questions than answers. Even the lead detective, a seasoned officer with decades of experience, abruptly resigned, citing unseen pressures and leaving colleagues with a note that read, "Some things are not meant to be known." Within the police department, whispers spread of shadowy forces at play, bureaucrats and officials acting to erase the case from memory. Each missing file, each altered report, made it impossible to reconstruct the events leading to the men's deaths. Internal memos suggested that the investigation had touched on sensitive material, though the nature of it remained a mystery. The more the authorities tried to piece together what had happened, the less they could be certain of. Names disappeared from witness lists, laboratory logs were scrubbed, and every lead seemed to dissolve into an official void. By the time the investigation ground to a halt, it was clear the truth was being buried not just on the hillside, but within the very system designed to reveal it. The pact beyond Earth expanded. Years after the tragedy, a former colleague came forward, hands trembling, voice barely audible over the hum of the interview room. He spoke of Manuel and Miguel not as ordinary technicians, but as men obsessed with reaching beyond the known. They had believed they were constructing a receiver, a device capable of communicating with intelligence not of this world. The colleague described secret meetings, whispered plans, and late-night experiments in the dim glow of circuit boards and coils. He spoke of the final test, the men's journey to Vintém Hill, with a mixture of awe and terror. They were convinced it would work, he admitted. They said they would hear the answer, but they never spoke of what might answer back. Every word from him carried the weight of fear. He insisted the instructions in the notebook, the capsules, and the timing were part of a ritualized procedure, part science, part obsession. Yet the ultimate question remained. If the device succeeded, if the signal was received, why did Manuel and Miguel die? The room seemed to grow colder as he recounted their final hours, as though the story itself carried the echo of something beyond human comprehension. Something, perhaps, that was waiting and listening. The signal that never stopped expanded. Decades have passed since the deaths on Vintém Hill, yet the mystery refuses to fade. Amateur radio operators and curious investigators alike report strange bursts of static emanating from the vicinity of the hill, intermittent signals on the very frequencies Manuel and Miguel had been experimenting with. Some dismiss the phenomenon as interference, natural atmospheric disturbances, or faulty equipment. But those who have listened closely swear it is something more, a patterned, deliberate transmission, faint yet unmistakable, echoing across the airwaves with a rhythm that feels almost sentient. Local residents speak in hushed tones of lights that flare in the darkness, of shadows that move against the wind, and of the hill itself seeming to pulse with a quiet energy. It is as if the signal, the very message the men had tried to reach, is still searching for a receiver, still waiting for someone or something to answer. The hill holds its secrets, and perhaps always will. Whatever Manuel and Miguel sought, whatever they heard or awakened, it continues beyond their deaths, a reminder that some messages are never meant to be silenced. And in the quiet of the night, when the wind rustles through the scrub and the city sleeps below, those who listen closely can almost feel it, The faint, unbroken signal, still reaching out from beyond, waiting for a response.